Welcome to Jebry's Gibberish, and today we're going to be talking all about diesel heaters. Well, summer in Australia is definitely long gone. It's way back in the rearview mirror, and we are now heading straight into our winter. And believe it or not, for me anyway, winter is one of my favourite times to go camping. In winter, you get to have a fire, it's not hot, you can sleep better, but sometimes it's a bit miserable. And the problem with winter is our Bureau of Meteorology is not very good at forecasting the weather. So what we find is if we go by the forecast and decide, no, we're not going to go camping this weekend, looks like it's going to be awful, or we go, hey, let's go camping this weekend, it looks like it's going to be a great winter camping weekend, we generally find when we get there, it's not how it's supposed to be. And quite often, you don't go camping because the weather's going to be terrible, and then you're sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon going, man, this weekend would have been perfect for camping, and I've missed out. It's one of the reasons why we bought the hybrid van, but it's also why I've been using diesel heaters for camping for quite a few years now. Now, I hear people all the time saying I like to sleep cool, so I don't need a diesel heater, it would make it too hot. And look, I like to sleep cool too, but I don't like to freeze my butt off. People who do a lot of camping often talk about having a good night's sleep, and we always focus on the mattress or what you're camping in, whether it's a camp stretcher, a swag, a tent, a caravan, hybrid, whatever it happens to be. What we often neglect is the temperature in which we sleep at. Now, I like to sleep cool, but I still use a diesel heater in the middle of winter. I've heard people say to me before, oh, we're in Australia, we don't need diesel heaters because it never gets cold enough. Well, maybe if you live in the Northern Territory, that might be the case, but even then, if you go anywhere remotely inland, it gets quite cool at night time. I remember one of the coldest nights that I've had was camping on the Great Central Road, and man was that cold. And I'm so glad that I had the diesel heater for that trip because it really saved us from having what could have been a woeful night's sleep. Now look, the price of these things, $50 to $200 to buy a diesel heater. You can buy ones that you can fit into your camper, or you can buy ones that are completely portable. And there's not really that much price difference. There are some advantages and disadvantages for both, and they all need battery power, so you're going to need to have some sort of way to power it regardless. With the portable ones, you do get slightly less capacity in the diesel tank, but I find on the average night I would use around about 1 litre of diesel if I leave it running all night. Now that's obviously on a lower setting, but to be honest, that's pretty much all we ever run it on. Sometimes if it's really cold, I remember one time in the wheat belt last winter, it was super cold, and we had it up a couple of notches from the bottom setting. But, these things go from about 1.4 hertz to 5.6 hertz, I think it is. Well, that's the one in this caravan anyway. And we have never really run it for any length of time over 2 hertz. It's just too hot. So when we're talking about $150, I mean, really, if it's going to keep you warm, if it's going to keep the missus happy, if it's going to keep you happy, if it's going to keep the kids happy, the dog happy, whatever, $150. I mean, that's a pretty affordable thing that you can buy, whether you buy a portable one or whether you decide to fit it yourself. So let's talk about some of the advantages of diesel heaters. One, the cost is super cheap. And I've had a Webasto one in my previous camper, which was worth thousands of dollars, and I've got a $150 eBay special in this caravan. And look, my personal experience with them is I actually like the Chinese one better. It's got a better remote control, it's quieter, and I mean, as far as everything else goes, there's no real difference. They're super efficient. You can get LPG heaters and you can use gas to heat your caravan, but they have to be installed by a licensed plumber, and a diesel heater doesn't, not that I'm aware of. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. And if you have gone completely LPG free, like in my old Travelander camper, and a lot of people are looking at this as an alternative now, especially with inverter technology, and a lot of people are going for electric cooking and getting rid of gas altogether, Diesel heating is a really good option because you can save the weight, hassle and danger of carrying gas bottles with you. So they're cheaper. They can be lighter and they can be potentially safer. You can also use diesel heaters to heat water, but that gets a little bit more complicated and a little bit more expensive. In my last camper, I actually had the diesel heater doing both the hot water service and the heating of the cabin, but there were some downsides to that, and we'll get to that in a minute. The other advantage of diesel heaters is they are really simple to install if you follow the instructions. Now let's look at the disadvantages to diesel heaters. Obviously you need somewhere to install it, unless you're going for a portable system, in which case you're still going to need to carry it around. The portable systems are generally a little bit heavier because they have a case to carry them in and they have a smaller capacity for the diesel tank. Diesel heaters can be a little bit smelly when they're starting up and shutting off. Just get that sort of kerosene smell, a little bit like when you're on a jet aircraft and they start up the motors as you're about to taxi and you get a little waft of jet A fuel or that kerosene smell coming through the cabin. You don't get it inside of the cabin, but outside where your exhaust pipe is, if you're standing around out there, you will smell that little bit of kerosene smell as it starts up and shuts down. The other disadvantage is they can be a little bit on the noisy side. Well, when we compare them to LPG heaters anyway. An LPG heater, you wouldn't even know it was running inside or outside of the camper. With a diesel heater, if you install it correctly, inside, if you've got it in a caravan, inside the caravan, you're not going to hear it at all, other than obviously the fan motor going. But outside, you will have the exhaust and the induction noise from the air filter sucking the air in, and obviously the exhaust expelling out the gases. Now, on a low setting, it's not too bad. On a higher setting, it can get a little bit up there in the noise. Again, it's nothing super bad. But if you do have someone camped right next to you and it's a really quiet, still night, they're going to hear it. It's not an obnoxious noise, but what can be a little bit obnoxious is that fuel pump, because they tick, tick, tick away all night long. Now, if you've installed that in the right place in your caravan, you shouldn't hear it at all. If you're sleeping in a tent, you're probably going to hear it through the canvas. So you're going to have to be conscious of that. The other thing is that people outside, again, on a really quiet, still night, that sound just travels. If you're sitting outside your camper and you've got a bit of music or some people talking, you're probably barely even going to notice it. But once all of the noise stops, the wind dies down, all the animals go to sleep, and you've just got that deathly, quiet, still camping night, that tick, tick, tick is going to be quite noticeable. The other disadvantage of diesel heaters is when they're starting, they use quite a fair bit of current. That's because they've got to run a glow plug to ignite and get running. So that glow plug stays hot for quite a little while until the machine is actually up and running. Once they're running, they're very efficient on power. They don't use much at all. But if you're cycling it on and off during the night and you keep heating that glow plug up, that can potentially cause a lot of battery drain. And that's the problem that I had with the hot water service version in my old camper. Because it used a sealed system with radiator coolant, just like in a car, it would heat up the coolant and then use two heat exchangers, one for the water and one for the air. And so what it would do is it would start up and heat up that coolant until it got to 70 degrees, and then it would shut off. And it would be constantly cycling on and off all night long. And that was really bad for, one, noise, and two, battery drain. Now with the Chinese one here that I'm using just for heating the air only, I just leave it running consistently on the lowest setting all night long, and it uses very, very little power, and it's very, very quiet once it's running. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you two different diesel heaters. I'm going to show you the one that I've installed in the Emu Expedition here right next to me. I'm going to show you a little trick that I did with the air inlet on that one as well. And then I'm going to show you around a portable unit that I've got as well. So inside the Expedition, we've got this little sort of couch arrangement over here. And under here is where the hot water service is. It's a Truma Ultra Rapid, you would have seen in some of my other videos.
There was also a underbench air conditioner here, a Chinese air conditioner that comes standard with these Emu Expeditions, and this here, these were the inlets and outlets for that, and this is where the control panel for it was mounted. Now I had that removed because we installed a Dometic rooftop air conditioner because they're a fair bit more efficient, and I decided to use the existing setup over here for the air conditioner, what was left over from it anyway, for the diesel heater controller down here. And I've also mounted the diesel heater next to the hot water system underneath this chair. So these were the original outlets for the air conditioner, and there was a third one down there. One was in and two was out. What I've done is I've changed it over so that these are actually just unplugged behind these two vents here from the air conditioner. And this is where the diesel heater draws its air from, and I'll show you that in a second. And this is the outlet. It did actually come with two outlets, and I've just opted for the one just because of ease of installation here. Now, I did put a master switch here, and I would recommend not doing this. I've done it because I saw online that these displays, they eventually wear out if you leave them on 24/7 all of the time while the caravan is in storage. The other thing is at night time, that can be a little bit bright. So if I don't need the diesel heater, I like to be able to switch it off. The problem with this is if you switch off the diesel heater before it's finished its cool down cycle, it only takes a few minutes for it to melt the circuitry inside of the diesel unit. You really need to make sure that they do finish that cool down cycle properly. So what I would do again if I was to reinstall this is I probably would put this somewhere else, maybe inside the electrical box at the front of the camper, somewhere it's locked away where it can't accidentally be switched off. I mean, it's okay because Mella and I are generally the only two people in here, and we know that you're not supposed to turn it off if it's doing its cool down, but it is a little bit of a hazard. So if you were to install an isolator like that for your diesel heater, put it somewhere where it can't accidentally be turned off. Okay, so to have a look, we just need to remove some of these cushions. Okay, so we've removed the cushions. We can just lift this up now and have a look inside here. So there's the Truma, that's the hot water system. And you can see here is the diesel heater and the wiring. And you can see how those vents were just completely vacant because the diesel heater actually draws its air in through this little filter here at the back. So that's just drawing it basically through there. Now the reason why I put it on an angle was it was going to be just a little bit too tight if I had it straight, and I wanted to leave that little gap in the corner there for the air intake to come in. And there wasn't going to be anything else in this area anyway, so it was a pretty good use of space. It's really important when you install these to make sure that you do correctly seal them down the bottom there, because that's where the exhaust gases leave the unit and go out underneath the van. You want to make sure that you definitely don't have any leaks there. They do come with a rubber gasket, but I also put heat-proof silicone in there as well, just to be doubly sure. It's quite a small unit, doesn't take up a lot of space really. As far as power goes, I just hooked into the 12 volts to the Truma system so that the hot water heater isolator and breaker in the main switch panel also runs the diesel heater. It was a simple way to do it, but I did put a separate fuse down here for it just to be on the safe side as well. And while we're talking about safety, I also installed one of these Quill carbon monoxide detectors as well, as we do have the LPG water heater and the diesel heater, and it makes me sleep a little bit easier at night time. Because this is technically a camper and not a caravan, it didn't come with a smoke detector, so I put one of those in. And of course we've got our fire extinguisher and our fire blanket as well. Not that that would help you if something was to start up underneath there. That would be a quick exit stage left. The other really nice thing about this little Chinese heater is it has a very nifty little remote control. Let me take that protective screen off, and it will give me, see if we get the light right, the current temperature inside, and it allows me to set either a specific temperature or the hertz rate of how often it injects diesel into the heater. Now, I started using it as a thermostat, and I thought that would be really cool. But what I found was that the heater would be speeding up and slowing down all night, and that would change the fan and the pulse rate and everything, and it just, I don't know, it kept me awake sometimes. I actually prefer it to just stay at a constant speed, and that way it's just white noise and I don't have any problem sleeping whatsoever. I also found that the temperature control wasn't great. It would seem to get a lot hotter than I'd set it. I just find it works a lot better just setting it to a specific pulse rate. But I normally leave that just up here next to where I sleep, and I can just grab it, turn it off, turn it up, down, on, whatever as required. Sometimes you don't have it going at all, but then you wake up in the morning and it's cold, and you can just grab this and turn it on, roll over and go back to sleep. Really great system. So outside of the camper, we've got our hot water service exhaust and intake, and down here we've got both the grey water tank drain, and we've also got the diesel heater exhaust. I've bent it back slightly so that we don't get water and dust and all sorts of muck in there as we're driving along. And you can see here that we've got the muffler, and I've just mounted it to the same mount that the grey water uses. That exhaust has been extended slightly. The factory exhaust wasn't quite long enough, and it was quite a challenge to extend it, to be honest, but it does work quite well. You've got to be really careful not to extend them too far and not to put too many bends in them, otherwise it can cause them to carven up and start playing up. So as the exhaust comes through, you can see right here is the bottom of the heater, and you actually don't cut out a huge big hole, you just cut out two hole saw holes, one for the intake and one for the exhaust, and sort of let them meet in a figure 8 configuration like that. We have here the diesel inlet for the diesel fuel going up into the left hand side, and then next to that is the cold air intake, and then spaced away is the exhaust. This exhaust gets really, really hot, so you need to make sure that it is not touching anything. You can see I've got it bending quite far away from all of the water and gas lines and everything, and then it just goes over all the chassis rail there. Now this is the fuel pump right here, and this is really important to have outside the van. It's really, this is the noisiest part of the whole bloody thing. I've got a little fuel filter, and then it goes up. You can see you've got some leaks there, and I'm not sure if it's leaking out of the tank or from just when I've been filling it up, but that goes into the front storage box, and I'll show you that in a second. Now this is one of the mods that I've just done recently, and it's really quite, I'm quite happy with it, to be honest. This is the intake hose, and it again was really short. Now before, I just had the intake sitting here underneath the caravan. Now I've run it up through the floor inside the fridge box. Now it's really important, it says in the instructions that you do not put this inlet inside of your caravan, because that will suck the oxygen out of your caravan potentially. But the fridge box is actually another sealed separate part of the caravan. It's a toolbox at the front, it's not joined to the main cabin area, and it has a filtered vent on it, which is used to keep the fridge cool. So that means that it can still draw air through the door, but it's not getting full of dust and water and sand and crap and getting wasps nest in it and everything when we're not using it. Because sitting under here, it was just copping an absolute flogging on gravel roads. You can see even here, look at this ding here. This must be from a bit of gravel on that exhaust. It's really quite crazy how much. You can see all the stone chips under here as well. It really does cop a flogging under here. So it's great to get that out and into the storage box. In here is where I store the diesel tank, just with all of the other rubbish I've got here. Now, the reason why I've put it inside the toolbox is because this plastic tank that came with the Chinese heater, it really does seem quite rubbish, and it does not look UV stabilized in any way, shape or form. And I figured if I put that outside in the sun, that thing would deteriorate in no time at all. So I keep it safely squared away inside the front box. Okay, so that's the diesel heater in the caravan, and I wouldn't be without it. It was actually one of the very first things I did to it.
I love it. Mella loves it even more because she carries a hot water bottle around with her everywhere we go, even in summer. So for her, it's fantastic. I just have to be a little bit careful if she goes to bed before me. Sometimes I'll walk in there and it's like getting off the plane in Bali at Christmas time. But normally if she's asleep, I can just turn it down and she doesn't notice. So let's have a look at this portable unit, because that's another way to go potentially, especially if you've got an older van, you don't want to do the installation, or if you camp in a tent, or you've got some other kind of arrangement where you don't want a permanent installation. Okay, so this is a portable unit, and I've actually just had a friend of mine get a different type of portable unit in from China, and his was actually much smaller and a little bit nicer than this. It was plastic, looked almost like a little 10-litre jerry can. This one's a little bit bigger and heavier with the metal case there, but the diesel tank's all included inside of it. You get your diesel in there. It comes with a remote control. It's not quite the same as the one on mine, but you can turn it on and off and turn the temperature up and down, which really is all you need. And it's got a similar display to what mine does. Of course, you've got your 12-volt lead that you need to hook up to a battery. You've got your inlet, which was very, very short. This one's actually had this little extension put on there, which reduced the noise from this quite considerably. This is the air filter, but it's also a muffler because, as I said, that's where a lot of the noise comes from. And then also it's got the exhaust, again quite short, but not necessarily a problem. And that's the little muffler there on the end. So this unit's not too noisy now that it's got that longer extension on there for the intake. And a little diesel level there. This one works really, really well and produces an absolute heap of heat. So this one was used in a rooftop tent. Basically this pipe here ran from the ground up into the intake of the tent, and it kept the rooftop tent warm. This just stayed outside under some shelter. Alrighty, so that's a quick look at both the portable and the fixed diesel heaters. I highly recommend them if you are thinking of camping in the winter, you like camping in the winter, or you want to do some more camping in the winter and the partner won't let you because they don't like the cold. Just go and get one. Just get it done. They're really cheap, and it means you can get out there more often and really enjoy yourself. I hope you enjoy the content that I make. If you do, please think about liking and subscribing. Remember, we've got our Patreon there. We do have some competitions coming up soon as well, so look out for those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.